Welcome to the Take 10 podcast, the show where we can explore mental health, mental well-being, and all of the ways that we can take care of our mind. Thank you for coming back. I hope you're having a good week. We are back with episode number 3. And in today's episode, we're going to dive into the world of anxiety disorders. We're going to talk a little bit about what they are, how they differ from regular stress, and we're going to explore the symptoms that in reality millions of people face every day. So as we explore this, I think it's really important that we understand what anxiety is. And anxiety is actually a natural emotional response, and it's characterized by feelings of worry, being nervous, or having fear about either future events or uncertain outcomes. Anxiety often involves a heightened sense of alertness, and it can manifest physically through symptoms like an increased heart rate, sweating, or feeling tension. While occasional anxiety is a normal part of life, having persistent or intense anxiety that interferes with your daily functioning could indicate an anxiety disorder, and that would be where we would want to seek additional care. Now, you may be wondering, and I've wondered this as well, the terms kind of get thrown around together, like having anxiety or stress. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between anxiety and just regular stress. Stress is a response to an immediate or tangible external pressure. So think about a deadline, a job interview, or even a challenging situation that comes up. Anxiety, on the other hand, tends to be more internal, and it can occur even in the absence of having one of those identifiable threats. So it could happen even if you don't have a job interview, a deadline, or anything else going on. Often with anxiety, it's focusing on the quote unquote what if scenarios or future uncertainties. Stress is typically temporary and it subsides once that stressful situation is resolved. But anxiety may persist for an extended period, even after a stressor has passed or when there is no clear stressor that even exists. There are symptoms that are associated with both stress and anxiety. Excuse me. And in stress, it often results in physical symptoms like muscle tension, headaches. But these symptoms are typically aligned with those specific challenges. And again, they're gone typically once that stressor has been removed. Anxiety, on the other hand, can include more pervasive physical symptoms. It can be things like restlessness, difficulty concentrating. Maybe it impacts your sleep. Again, these are just combined with issues that may not be tied to a specific event. They're just an ongoing stressor. Unfortunately, both stress and anxiety can impact our daily functioning as well. Whereas stress can motivate and drive people to meet challenges over an extended period of having an extended period of stress can be harmful. But anxiety, especially in the form of a disorder, can often lead to avoidance behaviors, irrational fears, and having significant interference in your daily activities, in your relationships, or even in your work. In short, stress is just a reaction to external challenges, while anxiety often originates internally and it persists, sometimes leading to overwhelming fear or worry, even when there's no immediate threat. To unpack this just even a little bit more, anxiety can be broken down into a handful of anxiety disorders. First, we have generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. And this is a mental health condition characterized by excessive, persistent worry about various aspects of your life. It could include work, your health, or relationships. This happens even if there is little or no reason to worry. And the anxiety associated with GAD is often difficult to control. And it's accompanied by symptoms like restlessness, fatigue, difficulty in concentrating, being overly irritable, having muscle tension, and trouble sleeping. There's also social anxiety disorder, which is also a mental health condition, and it's characterized by intense fear of social situations. And this is really the fear where you might be judged, embarrassed, or humiliated. This fear often leads to avoidance of social situations. And when that happens, it can significantly impact your daily life and the relationships that you hold. Another anxiety disorder that is prevalent is panic disorder. And this is one that's marked by recurring unexpected panic attacks. There are intense episodes of fear, discomfort, and they peak within minutes. With panic disorder, they're typically accompanied by physical symptoms like a racing heart, shortness of breath, dizziness, and you begin to persistently worry about having more panic attacks. We have not only anxiety disorders that we have to worry about, but as you continue to have anxiety about things, it can actually lead to phobias. And there are a number of phobias associated with anxiety that really stem from having specific fears that cause really intense distress and avoidance. We will not go into every single phobia and a deep dive of what it is, but just highlighting some of those that may exist. So also bear with me as I try to pronounce some of these. We'll get through it. Agoraphobia, which is the fear of being in situations where escape might be difficult, such as crowded places, open spaces, or in public transportation. There are also specific phobias of objects or situations like arachnophobia, which is the fear of spiders, claustrophobia, fear of being confined spaces. There are also things like social phobia, which is a fear of performing socially where one might be scrutinized or judged. Hypochondriasis. It's a health anxiety where you're excessively worrying about having a serious illness. There are driving phobias and even fear of flying. Anxiety can lead not only to these phobias, but as you experience these things, it can significantly impact your daily life, which is where therapy to help manage these situations or these phobias and anxiety comes into place. As we think about not only anxiety and stress and the impact to our life, I think it's also important for us to understand the physical symptoms that are associated with anxiety. It's also, excuse me, it's also important for me when I was going through some of this to think more about things that are in addition to the physical symptoms. So with anxiety, it can impact our physical life, our emotional life, and even behaviorally. So from a physical standpoint, anxiety can lead to rapid heartbeat or palpitations, having a shortness of breath, hyperventilation, like we've mentioned, muscle tension or stiffness. You can also get like sweating or chills, nausea or stomach discomfort, fatigue, restlessness, even dizziness or lightheadedness. But it's so much more than that. From an emotional standpoint, you're persistently worrying or in fear. You can feel overwhelmed or being on edge. You can find it difficult to concentrate. You may become overly irritable or easily agitated. And you can even feel a sense of impending doom. Behaviorally, some symptoms that can pop up are wanting to avoid specific situations, places, or even activities. You can find difficulty in completing tasks due to being distracted or worried. You may seek out reassurance or even over preparing for events. And the last one that we'll mention is you may engage in rituals or behaviors to reduce anxiety. Maybe you pace, maybe you fidget. All of these symptoms are going to vary in their intensity and again can impact your daily functioning. Just because you may have an anxiety disorder also does not mean that you're going to experience each of these symptoms. You may experience some, but not all, or you may experience them in a varying degree as somebody else that may be experiencing something very similar. Anxiety is something that we're all going to experience from time to time. It's a natural response to stress or even uncertainty. But it's crucial to recognize that when anxiety starts to become overwhelming, so when you begin to worry or fear feels constant, uncontrollable, or disproportionate to the situation, it can take a serious toll on all of our lives. Overwhelming anxiety can affect your physical health, causing fatigue, headaches. Emotionally, it can lead to feelings of frustration, irritability, and hopelessness. And it can even cause you to avoid important activities, withdraw from loved ones, or struggle from or focus on your work or school. As we learn to recognize these signs early, like when you start having anxious thoughts and they begin to interfere with your decisions and relationships, we can take proactive steps to manage this anxiety before it takes over our life. And having this awareness is absolutely key to maintaining balance and seeking the support that you need, not only to live, but to thrive as well. As we've mentioned previously in this podcast, this is not just about sharing facts and definitions. We also want to allow you to take action. And I think it's important for us, in order to do that, to hear from real world examples of individuals that have experienced the things that we're going to talk about this year. So today I'm super pumped to have back again, to have a heartfelt real world conversation with Stephanie Eiler, who knows and has experienced anxiety firsthand. So we're super happy to have Stephanie back with us to share her personal journey, her experiences, and some of the strategies that have helped her manage anxiety in her daily life. For those that don't know, Stephanie has her own podcast, the Citrus and Sun podcast, which is fantastic. She's been on our podcast a few times. This might be number 3, I think. Stephanie also has a TikTok account under both Piso Steph and the Citrus and Sun podcast. And I share this not to inflate anybody's head or ego, but at last glance, there were her account had 150,000 plus likes on the videos and messages that she put out there. And again, I share that just to help illustrate that the messages that she shares about positivity, self mindfulness, and tips to help your overall well-being are well received and beneficial to so many. So with all of that being said, Stephanie, welcome to the Take 10 podcast again.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be back and to be talking about such an important topic today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. You've mentioned before that you've had some experiencing and I guess just experience with some anxiety. So, can you walk us through maybe when you first noticed that in your life?
Yes. I think just going back to what you said about how anxiety is such a natural emotional response, and it is something, it is one of our primary emotions, right? So I think that it is very difficult to know when it's, stress, as you were talking about, and then when it's becoming something that might be impacting your life in a greater way. And I think for me personally, growing up, that was a big problem because, number one, mental health wasn't really talked about when I was younger, 30 years ago. And so it wasn't a really big topic of conversation. I think that a lot of times when anxiety would come out, it would be just labeled as stress or everyday anxiety that is healthy, right? Because, like you said, it can protect us. It can, help us know when we are in a stressful situation, like when we're about to speak. Like, it's healthy to have a little bit of anxiety. I had anxiety before coming on here today because I'm a little nervous, but that's healthy anxiety, right? For me, when I was younger, while I did have the normal healthy anxiety, I also had anxiety that at the time was impacting my life in greater ways. It was consuming me, for lack of better words. I would worry about everything. I was worried about my grades. I was worried about social situations I was going into. I was worried about, and this was more so when I was in elementary school and maybe getting into middle school. I was worried about things happening to people, like my parents. It would keep me up at night. Things that, like you said earlier, there was no sign of anything that was going to happen, but I would create these stories in my head. I would freeze. I couldn't play sports because I would just have this overwhelming panic inside of me when the ball would come to me and I would completely freeze. Like things like that, where I looked at other people and living their lives, not having those things happen. And I'm like, I don't know, what's wrong with me? I was constantly asking myself, what's wrong with me? But again, I think that to my parents and to my teachers, this probably just came off as like, oh, she's just a nervous girl. She's quiet. She's more introverted, because I was very introverted because of my anxiety, also because I was up here all of the time, just worrying in my head. So I think I knew from a very young age that something was going on. As I got a little bit older into high school, it only got worse. I had no one putting pressure on me for anything. That pressure was always put on myself. I would skip class and hide in the bathroom because I didn't want to disappoint anyone by something I said in class. Like, I was worried about speaking up. I was worried about getting tests back. I was worried about being in certain social situations. So I would just not go. I would have trouble sleeping. I would stay home from school because I would feel so physically ill. Sometimes not about anything. It was just like an overwhelming feeling I would have. Um, so that was kind of my early elementary, high school experience when I first started realizing that something was going on.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you first for sharing that. I'm curious too. At what point did you not only realize that maybe something was going on, but when did you realize that, hey, this is maybe more than just stress and it might be something more than that? And then what were the kind of like those steps to like uncover that, hey, this is more than just stress, and what did you do from there?
Mhm. Unfortunately, this didn't come until later in life when I really realized it. And it was because I moved when I was in my mid-20s to Chicago, and I wasn't in my comfort zone anymore. I wasn't with the people who had just seen me every single day live like this. I think that when you see someone and you know them so well, it's very easy to say, well, that's just who they are. That's just them. That's just their personality, right? So when I was in my mid-20s, I moved to Chicago because I met my husband, and I had never lived with really anyone before, like who didn't really know me inside and out yet. We had had a long distance relationship for about a year before. So obviously we knew each other enough for me to come pick up my entire life and move here. But um, when I moved here, he noticed it right away. I was having more panic attacks when I moved to Chicago because I think I was out of my comfort zone. I was away from people who knew me. I was very aware that I was acting a certain way in front of him. And I was very worried that he was going to really not want to be with me anymore. So I would try to like hide the way I was feeling, but then it would come out in panic attacks because I was just pushing it down. Um, we were canceling plans on friends, and he had never witnessed that before in me. Where to me, that was a normal thing because, I just did it because I would get nervous and anxious and didn't want to be in that social setting. So he was really, truly the one who noticed it. And it was really a lot like an intervention. He actually was the one who said, I want you to get help for this. I think it's anxiety. I've done the research on it. I think for me, I thought there was such a stigma behind it that I didn't want to even think something was quote unquote wrong with me. I wanted to be like everyone else that I saw seemed to be living, again, quote unquote normal lives, right? So when he came to me and said, I researched this and I want you to get help, and I found someone for you, like he did all the work for me, which I'm so grateful for. I wasn't at the time. I was not very happy about it. But yeah, it was really when I moved here and I had someone else really point it out to me
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I definitely want to explore those steps that happened after he was like, hey, let's get some help. But before we get into there were two questions that popped into my head. One, would you mind sharing a little bit about these panic attacks that you're having? Like what are you feeling and what's going through your head? Because I think for a lot of us, we hear about panic attacks. We talked about it just as we opened the episode, but that is just, it's what you find on Google, or it's, a brief description. But to actually hear what a panic attack feels like for somebody going through it, I think would be really beneficial. And then the second thing that you brought up is this, you didn't want, there was this stigma around, hey, maybe I have this anxiety thing and I don't want anything to be wrong with me. Could you explain a little bit more about, like, was the stigma that you wanted to avoid just that I don't want something to be wrong with me, or people going to think differently of me? Just kind of that, because what we hear as we talk about mental health and mental well-being everywhere is that there's a stigma associated with that, but nobody really talks about what that stigma is. So I'd be curious to hear your perspective of that.
Sure. Yeah, starting with the panic attacks, I think that I'll say first that I do think they can look different, for everyone. My symptoms mainly occurred at night, so I would get them at night. They would come on pretty quickly. I usually knew when they were going to happen once I started to recognize the symptoms. So for me, I would get really hot. My chest would get very tight. It almost felt like there was a boulder sitting on my chest. So I couldn't breathe. I would start to hyperventilate because the not being able to breathe made me more anxious. So like that would come out in hyperventilating. I would normally cry. And they would last, when I first started getting them, they would last a long time. And by a long time, I mean like 4 minutes was a very long time to experience this, it being in this state.
Yeah.
So also they were happening in front of my husband. So that was also causing me even more anxiety because I was embarrassed and I was like, I really didn't get them a lot when I was in Michigan. So I like really didn't know how to handle them at all. So it was a lot of emotions happening at one time. So yeah, those were the symptoms that came with mine. Now, when I get them, I recognize very quickly and I normally name it. I'm like, I'm about to have a panic attack, and I will say it, and I will still have one, but just naming it really helps. And my husband, we can talk about that more later too, but my husband knows how to help me through those, which is really helpful. Going along, I guess, with the stigma, because like I just said, it was embarrassing to have these. So, as I said before, growing up, mental health was not talked about a lot, and it just wasn't. And I think that, we see things in movies, or we read about people who have like mental health conditions, or maybe that's where I got that from. I really don't know where that stigma came from, to be perfectly honest. I also think that for me, a part of my anxiety came from wanting to be like a perfectionist. And I wanted to, for some reason, I felt like anxiety and depression meant that you were sick or that something was wrong with you, and that people wouldn't think that you were like happy, or, I was always the happy, light, smiley girl growing up. That's what people labeled me as, when inside I really didn't feel that way. But I didn't want anyone to know that because I liked that feedback people were giving me. I wanted to be that. So I tried as best I could to hide that piece of me. So I think maybe that is where that came from too. No one's fault at all. It's just how it was.
No, I definitely appreciate your insight into both what the panic attack was and kind of the stigma around that. I think you're right. A lot of people are afraid that maybe when somebody finds out that you're dealing with something with like a mental health condition, that people are going to think that they're not capable of certain things, or maybe they're worried that you'll be thought less of.
Mhm.
And a little bit of a side tangent here, just from my experience with Alex, who was diagnosed with depression and anxiety and OCD. Um, you know, my my love, sorry, my love for him and the way I thought about him, it never changed. And if we're being fully transparent, um, my admiration for him and love for him only increased. Um, because you knew how hard he was trying. And so, for anybody that's out there that's struggling, just know that you have a group out there that loves you too. Well, and that they're there for you. So keep going and just know that you do have a group that loves you, that they care for you, and they're there for you, and nobody thinks anything less of you. Um, so getting back on topic, you've now, whether you are happy that your husband has discovered that you may be going through something, or not, you've now identified, like, hey, maybe I do need to get help. Can you walk us through that journey through, like, I know that there may be something wrong. What am I going to do to get help? Did you experience any challenges in finding that help? And just talk a little bit about what that journey was like.
Yeah. It was hard because I was scared that the person I loved was going to, again, stop loving me, to be perfectly honest. And I really just truly appreciate what you just said. And I think more people need to hear that. What you just said about your brother, which was so beautiful, because that is, I think, personally for me, that was a big fear, that when people found out that I was going to therapy and that I had some, you know, struggles going on, I was worried that my parents were going to think less of me. I was worried that my husband wasn't going to want to be married to me anymore. And these sound so drastic, these thoughts, but they're very real when you're struggling with this. You really believe that because
Yeah.
your self-esteem is so low, and you just don't. I mean, I didn't like myself. So I did agree to therapy. I was resistant, but he said, just go once and just see, just once. And I said, okay, I can do anything once. And I had been to therapy before, but the difference between this therapy that he found for me and the therapy I had in Michigan is the person he set me up with was a depression and anxiety specialist. So they were trained in specifically working with people who had depression and anxiety, where the therapist I was going to in Michigan was, I don't know exactly what their title was, but they were more so just a therapist. Like, I was going to them and I was kind of talking to them, but there were no strategies being given.
Yeah.
there wasn't a plan in place. So so I went to therapy. I was diagnosed very quickly with generalized anxiety disorder. I also had health anxiety extremely. I haven't talked about that really yet, but that was impacting my entire life too. Very extreme health anxiety and social anxiety. So we started a plan, and I will tell you, I went back a second time and a third time, and I kept going because I just felt for the first time in my life, sorry, I'm getting emotional now. I felt seen, and I felt like someone understood me, and there was hope in not feeling like this anymore, at least helping myself manage it. So I kept going back, and it was the best decision of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that you went back. And I'm really curious. You had mentioned previously, hey, I get these panic attacks, or I got them and they last, 4 minutes or so, and then you made a comment that it was like, now I can recognize when they're coming on. They still come on, but I can recognize when they're going to come on, and I can maybe I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I can better manage them a little bit. Can you talk about was there like a key moment or like a strategy that you learned, whether in therapy or outside of therapy, that has helped you with this?
I think therapy in general has reduced them for sure. So I went through cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, essentially helps people understand how their thoughts and their beliefs and their feelings and behavior are all related. So there were a lot of different exercises that we did during that therapy that were very helpful when I was having, like, I would access them when I was having a panic attack. That took a lot of practice, because a lot of times when you're having one, you can't think of anything, right? But now that I can identify, like, okay, these are my symptoms, that I'm getting my tight chest, I'm getting hot, I'm feeling like overwhelmed, and I know this is coming. Okay, it's like now my pathways in my brain are like, okay, what is causing this? It's like choose your own adventure. Oh, I don't know what's causing it, or oh, this is causing it. Okay, since I don't know what's causing it, this is what I need to do. Since I do know what's causing it, this is what I need to do. So it's kind of like, I know that probably isn't very specific, but it's really, it's a practice that you have to kind of go through to really get to know yourself in those moments, so you know exactly what you need to do. And it is very empowering once you figure it out.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
I actually love that so much, because one of the things that you mentioned was that it is a practice. And you also mentioned that in the moment sometimes you don't, like, it's hard to do those things,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I'm a sports guy, and so I that took me back to, like, when you're playing a sport, you can't expect yourself to just jump into a game and be able to, hit the game winning free throw, or, have a great at bat in a baseball game without having practiced those things leading up to the game. And I think what a lot of people don't see is that for the basketball player that's, gonna take the shot with, seconds on the line, that he's already practiced that shot 10,000 times in practice, and so he's prepared himself for that. And there's really no difference um, in our practice, in our self-care practice either. And a lot of the techniques and tools that you learn, whether it be in therapy or just to help with your overall anxiety, are things that you need to practice when you're not going through like a mental health condition. So let's say one of the things that you want to do is, or that helps you, is mindful breathing or whatever. Like we should be practicing that whether we're having a panic attack or not, so that when you're in the panic attack, it almost becomes like a reflex, and you just know that you need to start doing that, and you've already done it before, so that helps.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you for that. You've already touched on this a little bit, especially with your husband, but maybe talk a little bit more about the kind of the role of the support system. Um, like how has that helped along in your journey? Um, are there things that you're now sharing, not only with him but like family or friends, or things about, like, are you setting expectations with people, or like having conversations about what they can do to support you, or I'm just interested to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yes. With my husband, he's the one who's with me the most, I would say. So he knows if it's to the point where I can just say, I'm feeling really anxious right now. And he's like, "Okay, do you want to talk about it, or are you okay?" Like he knows to ask me one of those things, or sometimes I'll just say, like, I need to talk about it. Sometimes I don't know if I do, or I'll say, I just need a minute. I'm very open. I think that that's very important, especially when it's somebody you're very close to just be very open about everything. And I trust him, and it's so beautiful to know that there's that unconditional love there, and that nothing I say or do is going to make him think less of me, which, again, that's something that's, I think, assumed in a marriage or in a relationship. But when you have anxiety, it's you don't think that, like I said before. So it's taken a while I mean, he's always felt that way about me, but it's taken a while for me to feel that on my end and to trust that, which has helped me now go into my other relationships in my life and have more trust in other people. My parents, I've become slowly, not as quickly, but slowly more open with them. I have to be, I find myself trying to be a little careful with that, because I don't want them to feel bad, like they missed something when I was younger or growing up, or like they did something wrong or didn't get me help. I'm very aware of that. And I know that that's not my responsibility. Like, I know, that, but I do care about that piece of it. So it's been kind of like a dance with that. And over the last few years, I've been going to therapy now for almost, I think, like 9 years now. So it's been a while. I've seen the same therapist. They know her name. Like, now it's like, I think being more open with them, I've actually learned more about their anxieties and where they struggle a little bit. Like, they've been more open with me about things. So we've kind of learned more about each other, which is really beautiful, because I think, I don't know, it helps to maybe hear where some of that came from, or where, I don't know. um, and it humanizes them a little bit more too. So yeah, I think that it's just building that trust. I still struggle with it. With close friends, I'm still getting there with being more open. I feel very comfortable around you, because you've made me feel very comfortable. I have some other people in my life who I'm not there yet. And that's not to say that they couldn't support me and unconditionally love me. It's like that trust thing. It's my own thing that I need to, like, kind of practice and learn. So
Yeah.
if that makes sense, that might have been a ramble, but hopefully that
No,
makes sense.
it makes perfect sense. And I appreciate you sharing. And, and I probably should have set this up from the very beginning, but just, this area and those listening, that this is a very safe space. And really what we're trying to do is to open the window into conversations that have typically been swept under the rug. And we're doing this because there is so much benefit in talking about this, and trying to help those that are either listening because they're struggling with something, or they're listening because they're trying to help somebody else, or they just want to learn a little bit more. So, Stephanie, thank you for sharing these experiences, in what I hope is a very safe space, and for being so vulnerable.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that you've been on this journey for 9, 10 years, something like that. It's probably a journey that it may not end. But as you think about where you started and where you're at now, is there any advice that you have for listeners who may be struggling with anxiety?
I think number one is listening to yourself and trusting yourself. That's number one, because you're in your heart, you're in your head all day. Like, you know yourself better than anyone. So if you feel something is going on, trust that feeling, and move forward from there. I don't know if I trusted that enough. I mean, I was very young, but and also, again, very grateful that there are spaces now where we can be more open and talk about this and normalize it more. But yeah, just trust yourself. And I think also finding someone outside of yourself, at least one person who you can talk to about it, because it can be very isolating. Um, and I know that I talked to my husband about it when I mean, I didn't talk to him about it really. He kind of pulled it out of me. But once I realized I could talk to him about it and be open with him, it was so healing and so just, it's like a sense of relief. Like, okay, I have this person who's on my side and who's here to support me. So find that person or those people in your life. And then the other thing I would say that's really big is if you are choosing the therapy route, finding a therapist that specializes in what you feel like you're struggling with, or at least naming it, because the sooner you do that, the sooner you can find someone who can kind of help you make a plan. I think that that's important. So you move forward and that you begin to get these strategies that can help you when you're not with someone who's there to support you. So finding a specialist is very important.
Oh, thank you for that. As we start thinking about closing our conversation on all things anxiety, I wanted to get some of your thoughts on practical tips for people managing anxiety. And again, this is like, when you're in school and you have a guest speaker come, it's always way better to hear from the guest speaker than it was like the teacher, because the guest speaker was usually like pretty knowledgeable and kind of an expert in their field. And so as we talk about some of these maybe tips for managing anxiety, I just would love to hear your thoughts or perspective on, like, hey, yeah, that worked, or maybe that doesn't work, or maybe think about it from a different lens, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. So like when you're in the moment, right, and you're experiencing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or just in general,
Mhm.
to help with anxiety.
Mhm.
The first one that came up was like having like a mindfulness or breathing exercise.
Yep.
Pretty good.
Yes.
Do you have any recommendations like on a breathing exercise, or like duration or
Mhm.
things to think about during that?
I think with breathing, anything that you can, like, this goes back to my kind of educator kids mindfulness yoga training. This helps me, like, using not only your breath but like being like tactile with it. So like doing something where like you put your, even if you're not doing it like this, but you have your hand like kind of near you and you're just like taking your finger and breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, and like just getting some sort of other sensation than just the breathing. Because I think the breath is good, but I think like more than one thing can be super helpful, whether it's a scent. Maybe you have like a lotion that you pull out and you just like put it on your hands and you breathe and take in the scent of it. So just maybe like a combination of two things is helpful. I also think just remembering that when you are in a moment where you're feeling some anxiety in your everyday life, sometimes I think we have to like, we feel like we have to push through it. Like we just, okay, just get through it. It's okay to just take like 30 seconds or a minute and just, even if you have to tell someone like, hey, I just need a minute, and being okay with that and pausing before, if you're speaking, like just pausing for a moment and taking a breath. And that's really in the setting of like if you're in a meeting or public speaking or something. Like I think sometimes for me I would always feel like I had to like fill the silence or like push through a moment, and just know that it's really not that noticeable to other people, like if you just take a minute and breathe and kind of ground and orient yourself with the room. So just being okay with doing that in a moment if you feel like you need it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
For those that are listening and not watching, Stephanie was talking about the hand and breathing, and it was basically tracing your hand as you're breathing. So hold one hand up, use your other hand. As you breathe in, you're tracing along like your thumb, for example, and then as you breathe out, you're going down the thumb. And then as you breathe in again, you're going up your index finger. And as you breathe out, you're going down. And you do that as you're tracing your hand, kind of like a Thanksgiving turkey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was awesome.
Thank you.
um, the other thing that came up quite a bit was, the importance of keeping a consistent daily routine. Have you found any benefit in the routine that you hold that helps with anxiety, or maybe not so much?
Definitely my yoga practice has been a big factor in just having that mindful time, even if it's for 10 minutes. Having a mindful movement practice and or a meditation practice. I also think that, I think this is this is something that I've been working on for a while, but it's just having less screen time. I think our screens can make us very anxious. I think the blue light, I think the like constantly being fed information when we first wake up or before bed. I really do feel like way less anxious when I have a set time that I don't look at the TV or social media or anything like that. So that's a huge one, I feel like, and it's hard. It's very
Yeah.
hard.
And maybe I like what you said. Maybe it's not like having the daily routine where you're doing everything the same each day, but it's
Mhm.
having some of those the key things that you're doing every day, like a yoga, or like, hey, every morning I'm going to go for a walk,
Yes,
or something like that. That's awesome.
absolutely. Yes, getting outside, nature, absolutely. The
Yeah.
sunshine. Yeah.
Yes. And we will talk about that at one of our episodes. Not only like talking about the sunshine, but um, for those for those that want to do a little pre-research, it's Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford. But if you type in Andrew Huberman, the benefits of sunlight is going to be the first thing that pops up. But he goes into the neuroscience and the science behind why getting sunlight and being outside will help with your overall mental health. He talks about how it will improve your sleep routines and help with a bunch of stuff. So, anyways, we'll dive into that at some point. But if anybody out there wants to get a head start, it's a great listen and read from his podcast and website. So the last practical tip that I was seeing a lot of, and I'm incredibly awful at this one, was journaling.
Mm.
And the thought behind it was like, hey, as you journal, you may be able to identify triggers or patterns or things. Do you journal, Stephanie? And if so, how's that going?
I'm getting more into my journal practice again.
Okay.
I've kind of taken a little leave from it, not because I wanted to, just because I frankly have just been bad at being consistent and pulling my journal out. But when I was an avid journaler, it is super helpful. And sometimes it's just helpful to write down, I'm feeling anxious today, or this is how I'm feeling, and then just be done with it. I mean, it can just be 1 or 2 sentences. I also think that when you have a consistent journaling practice, I've always said the best self-help book is your own journal, because you can look back and see different patterns in your thoughts and your feelings and different things that happened before, like, oh, I was feeling this way and this was going on that day, and it also was going on this day. And you can start to see those things and those patterns, and then you can kind of take action in a more intentional way. So not only is it therapeutic to just get your thoughts out, but I think it also can help you get to know yourself more.
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that, which now brings us to our weekly challenge. We talked about that this isn't about facts, it's about doing some action. And so for everybody out there, I want you to try one anxiety reducing activity this week. It could be mindful breathing, it could be limiting caffeine, it could be journaling, it could be, you name it, something that is going to help you reduce anxiety and or stress in your life this week. And would love for you to share your experience with me wherever you're listening or watching this. If you want to use the hashtag take10, that would be awesome. And then we'll recap some of your experiences next week. And in addition to the weekly challenge, I've got a question for you that I want you all to vote on this week. So wherever you're watching, listening, there will be a poll in the comments. I want to know what your biggest challenge with anxiety has been. Has it been recognizing it? Has it been managing symptoms? Has it been seeking help? Or is it in supporting somebody else? So take a moment to think through what your biggest challenge is with think about what your biggest challenge with anxiety is, and go ahead and vote on what that is for you. And with the poll, there's no use of any of this information. We just use it as an opportunity to learn more about how people are experiencing the different topics that we are talking about. So appreciate everybody that goes in and votes. So today we've talked a little bit about stress and anxiety. For me, it's the biggest takeaways are that stress is usually caused by an external event and can reduce once that event has subsided or is no longer there. Anxiety is more it's going to be persistent in your life, and it can be caused by things that are made up in your mind or may be caused by things that could potentially be, I don't want to say irrational, but caused by the way your mind kind of goes into different worst case scenarios. Um, I love Stephanie's insight into how she experienced panic disorder or panic attacks. The main thing that she's not the main thing. I'm sorry. There were so many good things, but the one that stood out to me the most was one, seeking help. Two, that people really aren't thinking less of you, and they don't love you any less. And three, to practice those coping techniques to make sure that they work for you, and also to do them prior to going through an anxiety attack or whatever you may be experiencing, so that you are able to try and reduce that as not that they're not going to come on, but that you're going to be able to work through it maybe a little bit more efficiently. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. As we close out, do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you'd like to share?
Thank you so much for having me, and again, for creating this space to talk about these things. I think it's so important. I absolutely love your weekly challenge. And I would say with that, there are so many things out, so many strategies out there to help with anxiety. And just pick a couple that work for you. I know meditation might not be your thing, yoga might not be your thing, but maybe journaling is, or maybe just getting outside is, or maybe whatever it is, just find what works for you, but don't feel like you have to do 10 things. I think just picking one or two and sticking to those is so helpful in being consistent. So that was, I'm just saying that because of my personal journey with it. I felt like I had to do everything. So just find what works for you. And again, thank you so much for this space and allowing me to talk about my journey, and for giving this space to others so that they can hopefully take something from it too.
Well, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for that. And again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all that you do in your space. For those that are out there listening, go check out Stephanie's all of her socials and where you can find her. I'll post that in the comments. But Stephanie does such a fantastic job of communicating tips and tricks to help with being mindful or being thoughtful. And one of my favorite things that you do are you kind of do challenges every once in a while, and it's like, hey, here are 3 things that you should think about today, or think of somebody that you're grateful for and share it with them. And she does a fantastic job of getting you to think and to take some action, which is so beneficial in this world where there is so much going on, and sometimes we feel like it can become a little bit overwhelming. And as all of us go about our days, we can really have a positive impact in not only our own world, but in the world of those that we interact with. And so as we go about this week and as we go about our lives, I would just continue to challenge each of us to do, to be, and to inspire good in all that we do. So thank you for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you.